Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Wealthologist Live. I am Chris Hobart, the Wealthologist, and as always, it's a real pleasure to connect with you, our clients, our friends, our fellow wealth builders who are tuning in from now. We're finding out just everywhere, all across the U.S., maybe even Europe. Who knows? This month, and let me real quick, I need to introduce you, Jacob.
Hello.
This is Jacob Woodrum, our lead investment strategist. You all know him because, hey, Jacob and I do this every month. We bring this to you. And Jacob, I always tell a fun story while we're letting people get in. So my fun story this time is, it's the Renaissance Fair. I don't know if anyone's ever gone to the Renaissance Festival. Really unique experience. People really dress up for this. Medieval.
I have not been. Chris keeps telling me I need to go. I'm gonna get there one day.
You got to take the boy there.
Yeah.
And number 2's on the way as well. So
yes.
He'll be a little bit too young for that. But Blythe, who just turned 12, still likes to go with me, which is awesome because at some point I know she is not going to want to go to the Renaissance Fair. We do the same thing every year. We both get elf ears. We get a turkey leg. She gets henna tattoo. She gets a wax hand. But I don't have pictures this time because I was a little delayed in getting those up to our system here. But if you want to see some of those pictures of Blythe and I at the Renaissance Festival, hey, you can go to our Facebook page, which is Hobart Wealth on Facebook. Check it out. You can see some fun pictures. You can see a picture of me with elf ears. That's the only dressing up that I do. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you I don't.
Is it though?
I don't go full out into all the other gear. There were some people there that I just thought that might be a waste of money. But hey, if it gets you, like people could look at me and say, Chris, well, the way you dress is a waste of money
Well,
sometimes.
yeah.
So hey, it's there. All right.
To each his own.
To each his own, right? All right. Well, this month we're going to dive into some critical insights. You know, obviously the election just came up, so we're going to be talking about the economy, some market strategies, and really some really strong, powerful financial planning tools.
Right.
You know, I think the way we're going to run this down today is probably even more important because I know the Fed, we're waiting to hear on some Fed news.
Right.
We always talk about the Fed, but there's just a lot of moving pieces right now as we come into the end of the year. Now, as you all know, we tend to do this in a concept we call the 3-2-1. Today, we're actually going to have a special guest.
Hey,
I'm
excited about this.
We're going to have our Director of Financial Planning, Corey Sundstrom, join us for the last part to give his perspective, his expert kind of vision on the one, which is the financial planning topic. So today, you're going to get that top-tier analysis and actionable advice that really helps you stay ahead in your financial journey. But before we go into the 3-2-1, I want to make sure that all of you that are new to the show, you understand what this segment's about. So Jacob's going to talk about 3 impactful economic events shaping the market. Time limits apply. I don't have the timer out today.
Okay.
But it's going to be Chris's time. If I start getting bored, I'm going to just say, it's time, Jacob.
Chip chop.
Jacob's going to be talking about 2 portfolios that we're spotlighting this month. And then finally, this is when Corey's going to come in. He's going to be talking about a financial tip to add to your toolkit.
Yeah.
So, Jacob, if you are ready now, give me 1 second because I've got fancy slides that I put together when we talk about the 3-2-1.
There we
Look
go.
at that. Isn't that
Beautiful.
fancy? And then to even make it better, whoa, that's the wrong way, Chris. Here we go. Are you ready to take away at number 3?
I am, sir. I am.
All right. Go ahead, my friend.
So, I want to start by talking a little bit around, the 3 key economic themes that Chris mentioned. And we're going to talk first about economic growth and really our outlook for that. Before I get into the weeds with that, though, I did want to share a slide. I've got a really interesting slide. I think we've all been tuned in to the recent developments or results, I guess I should say, of the election. And, depending on what side of the fence that you fall on, you may be super happy or super sad. But I think, our job really comes down to saying, rather than getting emotional about the outcome and the results that happened, let's look at the data, let's look at the research and kind of glean some insight from that. And so what we're looking at here, we'll spend a little bit on this and then we'll go to a couple points from an economic perspective. We're looking at the performance of the S&P. And what's so interesting is we're looking at the performance of the S&P, but we're looking at it in the years that we had a Republican sweep, which is what we're experiencing today. And what you can see is we're measuring, this is going back to 1953, and then we've got years in between that up to 2018, but we're measuring the average of the S&P based on years with a Republican sweep versus what they call the unconditional average, which is just the straight up average, not taking into account a Republican sweep. And you can see we've got outperformance in that year of about 3% on average, so 16% versus 13%. I think that's really interesting. Really points to the fact that we can kind of be feeling one way or the other based on what's happening, but looking at the data is really important.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point.
So, with that being said, let's talk a little bit about this tale of 2 forces that we're kind of experiencing from the standpoint of economic growth. And we've got tax cuts and forced or reduced regulations that are kind of, really fueling optimism that I think will probably, should drive business growth, and the markets are really kind of expecting that. But on the flip side, we've got the T word, the tariffs, and if we continue to see that implemented, I think that could potentially push up costs, probably fuel inflation. And in that type of environment, this is the key, I think in that type of environment, smaller U.S. companies that are less exposed to that international trade, they're really likely to benefit the most from that type of policy. So that's the first economic growth update. I want to jump right into monetary policy. And Chris and I talk about this a lot, the Fed and interest rates and what's happening.
I still owe you money on that last bet.
I'll hold him to it. But the big thing that is really on the horizon, December 6th, we've got a jobs report that's really going to be a kind of a critical moment. And I think it's probably going to solidify expectations for one final rate cut this year. So I'm calling it right now. I don't know if Chris wants to put any money on it, but
you know what? I can't guess the Fed anymore. All I'm going to guess is that if they give a rate cut in December, they're probably not going to do the next rate cut.
Okay, there you go. Well, we'll see. But I think we're going to get a quarter percent cut probably to round out the year. The thing that we all know is we've got rising government debt, and that's also putting this kind of upward pressure on long-term Treasury yields. That's a kind of probably a little bit more that we need to unpack there. But essentially, we're just seeing rate cuts happened, and bonds actually you would expect to go up, but they've still been the price of bonds going down in the short term. That's a little bit disconcerting, or like, well, that doesn't make sense based on what we would expect. But it all has to do with those expectations of where future rate cuts will fall, and if that is changing, that's going to change the impact of those prices of bonds and fixed income. So, when we think about monetary policy, I think the key takeaway with this is that we're likely going to get rate cut in December, probably 0.25%, but we want to see what that jobs report looks like in December.
It's really interesting, though, because, do we really need that rate cut?
It's a great question.
I don't know. I obviously the Fed is wanting to keep everything good and happy and healthy. I just get worried that next rate cut could start to jump inflation up again. But
and I think that's the big balancing act that the Fed finds themselves in, and we'll see. I certainly wouldn't. I'm not wishing that I had Jay Powell's job. Let's just say that.
I don't know how long he's going to have his job. I think isn't there rumor that that there's a change at the helm coming? So
there is. All right. Well, the last thing that I wanted to talk about in the three is really more kind of from an international perspective, and specifically actually China. Now, we've in our models, our portfolios, we've got international exposure. I mean, we all know that, but we've really been intentional about not having a lot of exposure to China, and higher U.S. tariffs. I mean, that's certainly going to challenge. I think China's kind of export-driven economy. China is doing things to kind of pivot around that and boost local spending and investments, what have you. But despite all of those seemingly hurdles that they're probably going to experience, the forecasts are still showing really positive growth in 2025 for China. So I think the moral of that story is, right now in our portfolios, we don't really see China as a place we want to be from an investment standpoint. Right. But things are going to change, and if things look different, next month, next quarter, we may decide we want some allocation or exposure there.
Now, you may not know this off the top of your head, but China's GDP historically, though, 4.75 is low for them.
Yeah,
right?
That's a great question. I'd have to look. I'd have to do more research.
It seems like a lot of people were critical that they were goosing numbers over the past number of years, and
that's part of the reason why we've been hesitant to allocate a lot of investments, because the goosing of those numbers, you're never certain of what the number really is because of what China is.
That makes sense.
But I think these developments, again, these kind of shape our investment opportunity at the end of the day, and we'll certainly continue to discuss how this kind of impacts and might affect our portfolio strategy in the coming months during these Wealthologists.
Well, hey, it's funny you mentioned our portfolio strategy, because this brings us to the Wealthologist, the number 2, which is when we're going to be talking about specifically portfolios. So let's shift gears and let's talk a little bit about our managed portfolios, how they're positioned, and maybe as we always talk about, let's talk about 2 that are having either the most impactful a change for our clients, or things that we're really looking and saying, it's something to consider for a lot of our clients within their portfolio.
Yep. Yeah, I've got 2 that I want to talk through today. And the first one is a what we call our dynamic small cap select. And I think this is one that, when I think about this particular investment, it's a disciplined, sector neutral portfolio. I'm going to unpack sector neutral.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'm reading your mind, Chris.
You're getting good.
I'm going to unpack sector neutral in just one second, but it's a portfolio we typically hold 60 to 65 small cap stocks. So small cap meaning not your Apple, not your Google, not these big companies, but we want smaller companies. And it's really, built to outperform the Russell 2000 over a full market cycle.
And the Russell 2000 tends to be aggressive.
Yes,
So.
it's also small cap, so that's kind of a good benchmark for us. Really feel like this is an opportune time for something like this because of where valuations are. And this slide that we have up here kind of points to this. We're basically looking at the 12-month forward return following a U.S. presidential election. Now, it doesn't matter whether, it's Republican, Democrat. It's just saying anytime we had, following a U.S. presidential election 12 months forward, what was the return of the Russell 2000, so small cap stocks, versus S&P, which all tend to be large. And what's interesting, you can see, we've got it broken down by year here on the bar graph, but if we just look at the averages, so the horizontal lines here, we can see that 12 months following a U.S. presidential election, small caps tend to outperform, and they've outperformed over the last, 40 years by about 3 percentage points, which is interesting. Again, Chris knows I love looking at this data and understanding it, but that's really the idea why we say, okay, hey, looking at a small cap strategy could make a lot of sense. Again, just given the attractive valuations, and I think it could be an exciting option for more of a growth-oriented investor.
Okay, that's now a quick question on that. Does that include anything in the crypto world? Because I know a lot of folks are interested in crypto. Is that something that would typically be in a portfolio like that, or held in something else? Usually
held in something else. You may have, depending on what type of small cap companies that we're investing in, you could have some exposure,
kind of ancillary exposure.
Yeah, ancillary exposure. But I think the crypto is quite the craze right now, and that's one of those things where from a small cap perspective, we're probably not going to have a lot of exposure to crypto. But if you want to hold crypto or own crypto, there's other ways that you can do that, and we can always talk about that. Second portfolio is our prime balance growth portfolio, and I think this, I always mention or think about this one. It's not a strategy that is probably as exotic or as kind of sexy as a small cap strategy, but it is really a strategy that's kind of designed for resilience. It's a portfolio that it's right now about a 90-10, so stock to bond exposure, 90 stock, 10% bond, and it's really just a balance of growth potential and still offering some downside protection. We've leveraged bonds, we've leveraged a little small exposure to gold, even some buffered equity, which we can kind of dig into if we have time. But essentially, the high level is we've tried to say let's have a growth tilt, but also have a balance to it. With having some downside exposure or protection, I should say, built in. So it's kind of one of those that I think is a strategy that's good to kind of weather volatile markets. I don't really love calling it an all-weather strategy because I don't love that term, but it is, I think, one of those that you could say to get competitive returns over time and try to limit some of the volatility. It's a really good strategy for something like that.
Okay, is that what we have up on the screen there?
Yeah, right here. This actually, I'm going to end with this. So this doesn't really relate to the two strategies, but this is a graph that's saying, okay, hypothetically, year to date, because I think it's easy to look at the markets where they are today and say, wow, they've done really well. They're sitting at high levels. Is now the time to invest or to put more money in or to stay invested? Well, a lot of people are sitting on cash right now. And if you think about where the market is, sometimes you could sit there and say, wow, it feels like the markets are, high levels is now the time to move into the market or even to stay invested. Well, I will say that it is the time to stay invested. It is the time to stay invested because, again, we're looking at three different scenarios, which I think is just so interesting. So hypothetical year-to-date portfolio growth of $10,000 in the S&P. So we've got a perfect timing scenario, worst timing, and a do nothing. Now, if we're making monthly contributions perfectly, $1,000 at monthly troughs, you can see that $10,000 over the year has grown to $25,000. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
But look at the worst timing. It's still almost the same. And even in a do nothing scenario where we just stay invested and we allow the markets to do what they do over time, that's still a really competitive return of over 20% just for this year to date. So I just kind of wanted to end on that. I think that's just a good reminder to not get too caught up in where market valuations are at the moment. But again, it's the cliche, the cliche discussion of not timing the market, but the time in the market is what's so important.
Yeah, and I think that's good. And the reality is that, with the management that we're doing, we're trying to lean people in the right direction of, time in the market. We want to be in the market, but we also want to make sure that we're leaning into the right areas, which is obviously what your job is.
Yep.
What I always find fascinating is how all of these portfolios, we build them to align with our clients' goals and really the current market landscape. And I appreciate what you do.
Yeah.
I appreciate your insight. Now, this is a little bit different, folks, because typically Jacob would be hanging around for this next segment, but we have a special guest star today that's going to be coming out to join us for the 3-2-1. And this is going to be the number one where we talk about the financial planning tip, and we're going to welcome our special guest today, Corey Sundstrom. So, Corey, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a while since you've been here.
Yeah.
But Corey's our director of financial planning. As many of you know that work with Corey, his expertise is absolutely invaluable when it comes to helping our clients really make the most sense of their financial strategies on tax planning, on income planning. Now, today, you're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what's called the rule of 55.
Right.
Now, I didn't even know this was a rule. I knew it occurred.
Such a rule breaker. That's why.
I didn't even know it was a rule. I just thought it was like a standard. It's like, oh, of course. But you brought up the point like, hey, Chris, not everybody knows about this because not everybody does what we do all the time. And I thought, well, son of a gun. So, Corey, you get to talk about this game changer of a concept called the rule of 55, or as Chris calls it, 55. We're close.
It's interesting you say that because it's a really powerful strategy to be able to use, but a lot of people just don't know about it. And so let me paint a picture for you about where something like this might come in. Let's say we've worked our entire life and played by the rules and put all of this money away in our 401ks, just like we were taught to do. And we do such a good job of it that we have more than enough money put away early in life.
Right.
And so we're getting into our mid-50s. We're thinking to ourselves, hey, this work thing is a little overrated. I would like to spend more of my time doing something I enjoy. And so there's a stipulation in the tax code called the Rule of 55. And essentially what this lets us do is once we reach that age, we can, as long as we play by the rules, we can start to take distributions from our 401k to help supplement cash flow. So if most of our savings has been done in the 401k, I think a lot of us know if we pull out early before the age of 59 and a half, we have a penalty to pay. So we have to pay income tax, and then we also have to pay a 10% penalty. So this rule allows you to pull the money out of the 401k. You will still have to pay income tax on it, but as long as you play by the rules, you don't have to pay the 10% penalty. So it gives you some flexibility if you want to step away from work early. The two caveats that you just want to keep in mind is, number one, you can only do this with a 401k that you're currently active in. And so the employer that you are retiring from, it is that 401k, that's the money that you can use for those distributions. You cannot use an old 401k. You cannot use an IRA. It's got to be that current employer 401k.
Now, quick question.
Yep.
What if somebody rolled their old 401k into the new 401k?
That is a great question, and you can absolutely do that.
Okay.
So you can take an old 401k, roll it into the new 401k, and as long as you do that before you initiate these Rule of 55 distributions, then it's allowable. So that can give you more in the way of resources. The other thing that you can do is you don't have to use the whole 401k for the Rule of 55. So many employers will allow you to roll a portion out when you retire to an IRA, if that's money that you want to keep for more strategic planning for other things, and then just keep a chunk left in your 401k meant to cover your cash flow needs. And that just helps bridge you from your current age to age 59 and a half when you can start taking out of those IRAs. It also will help bridge you to Social Security or other pension or other sources of income that you may want. So it's just a great piece of flexibility that's built in that a lot of people just aren't aware of.
And what I really love about that is, look, at some points, people aren't ready to necessarily be done working at 55, but instead they're ready to change or to pivot. And this allows them the ability to pivot at age 55, have access to some of those funds, and change what they're looking to do with the safety net of knowing that they're not walking away from income.
Right.
And I like that for a lot of clients because, look, a lot of folks, they've put in the time up to age 55, and they've got the money to redefine what they want to do, which is really cool. I mean, who doesn't like that? I think of some of our clients that have done that. Their big concern was, am I too young to do this? And the reality is, some, yes.
Yep.
And other ones we can look at and we can say, with the rule of 55, absolutely, you can do it. And this is a game changer. I mean, it allows early retirement. So I don't know. I like that.
We love it when you put a plan together and then we can help you execute on it. If that means retiring early, then that lights a fire under us. So if we have the opportunity to use a strategy like that, it really gets us fired up.
Cool. Yeah. All right. So now, last time we introduced something new, and this was our quick fire question. Now, the last time we did this, Jacob asked me the questions, but hey, you're here. So
let's do it.
I want to ask you the questions, and to make it even better, I've got it so people can see the questions up on the screen instead of us asking. So let me work my handy dandy little thing here. Now, again, the rule behind this is that I'm going to throw this to Corey, and then Corey just gives a 1 or 2 sentence answer. It's not about a long answer. So if you're sitting there saying, I wish Corey gave us more of an answer, hey, give Corey a call. That's what he's here for. All right, so first question that we have, is gold still a good hedge against inflation?
Yeah, it can be. It depends on the timing of getting in gold or the amount of allocation you have to it in the portfolio, but it can certainly be a piece of a portfolio that you use to your advantage.
And we have a little bit of exposure in our portfolios as well. Different portfolios have some gold in them.
Yep.
All right, number 2, should I pay off my mortgage before I retire?
That is a question we get all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
I would say if you have a mortgage from years ago when your rate was maybe 2.5% or 3%, certainly from a financial perspective, it can make sense to not pay it off and continue paying the mortgage because the rate is so low. Mortgages today and their rates, maybe that's a little bit more of a question, but this is also an emotional thing too. And so if psychologically it really helps you to get that debt off of your plate, then if we can make it happen and it's not adverse to the plan, we can do it.
And I think that's great. I think of my dad, right? My dad had a great low mortgage. It was a lot of opportunity to say, hey, Dad, don't pay off the house. But for him, it was just a matter of like, man, I'm retired. I don't want to worry about anything.
That's right.
So for him, that was the right decision. Now, again, we can do all the math equations and all of that. But the reality is sometimes it's peace of mind. Other times it is a matter of I want to squeeze every penny out that I can. And there's things that we can do towards that as well.
Yeah.
All right. We are going to move on to our next segment. And this is, I got to tell you, this is always my favorite segment. We've been doing this more and more. It's the segment called Hey Hobart, because we've been getting so many different questions that have been coming up. And what we're going to do here is, or what this is this is a chance for you, the audience, to ask us a question, and we answer it for you. And if you've got a question that you want answered in the future, all you got to do is email us, heyhobart@hobartwealth.com. Now, today's question comes from Linda. Linda's in Charlotte, North Carolina, and let me get her question queued up here. I missed that last third one, didn't I?
That's okay. We'll let it slide.
All right. Somebody's going to be mad that sent that question. They're going to be saying, what about my question? We'll get it next time.
The answer is yes.
All right. There you go. All right. So the Hey Hobart question this time is from again, Linda in Charlotte. She says, hey, Hobart, I'm 62 and considering working part-time while starting Social Security. How will this impact my benefits? And Linda, great question. Specifically at your age, at 62, you can start taking that early benefit, or you can wait till 70 for the full benefit. But if you start collecting Social Security before your full retirement age and you continue to work, your benefits may be reduced based upon your earnings. So it's very important. If you've got some income coming in and you're trying to do that, that's called double dipping. So for 2024, the earnings limit is $22,320. So if you earn above this, Social Security is going to withhold $1 for every $2 you earn over the limit. Now, once you reach full retirement age, which is going to be around 66 and some months, these reductions, they stop, and your benefit's going to be recalculated to credit you for withheld amounts. So That said, there are obviously long-term implications, so it's important to carefully really consider your income needs and your tax situation as well. We'd be happy to talk about this with you. Corey, I don't know if you have any other specific insights around that or not.
Yeah, I would just remind you that your Social Security is, depending on how much income you have coming in, it may be taxable. So just keep that in mind too. You may not just have a reduction of earnings, but there's likely to be some taxation there depending on how much work income you have coming in on top of it.
I think that, and here's the thing, that is the case even when we're talking about somebody that is not working.
Right.
You know, you might be 70 years old, getting your Social Security coming in, and you said, I thought it was tax-free. Up to 85% of your Social Security can be taxable, even after retirement and all of that. And it's just all associated with the other types of income you've got coming in.
Right.
And we'll see, you know, that's also been part of the conversation, that political conversations going on, is how that will be treated. So it's going to be an interesting, it's an interesting political football, shall we say.
Is that the next episode?
No, we'll see. We'll see. Well, and speaking of that, this officially wraps up this month's Wealthologist Live. Jacob, who's over there in the corner, and Corey, I want to thank them for their expertise, obviously, with what they do at the firm, and for all of you that are clients of ours. They do a terrific job. I want to thank all of you that joined us today. Next month, we are going to be talking about some year-end tax strategies. I think Andrew's going to actually be coming in to do the one. So if you're a fan of Andrew and you don't like Corey, hey, good time to come in. Or if you like Corey and Andrew, that's perfectly fine as well. We're probably going to talk a little bit about holiday spending and how to do some of that without derailing your financial goals. And as always, we're going to talk about some pretty exciting market updates. Who knows what the next month is going to have, but we will know if the Fed cuts rates. So mark your calendars and tell a friend to join us. Until then, I'm going to encourage you to stay informed, stay engaged, and remember, you don't have to navigate your financial journey alone. We are here to help. We'll see you next time.